Um, so far, I was talking about some topics that you may be interested in. There are many topics, but because of time limitation, so I just picked up several topics that I think it's interesting. Uh, for you, it may not be interesting, but if you can find something, then I think it's very helpful. So now I'm moving to the social preferences. Previously, I was talking about abnormality, so that there are some kind of a systematic abnormal behavior of people. I mean, if we assume that people are selfish and rational, then this behavior seems to be regarded as abnormality stuff. So people try to understand this kind of thing, and they just analyze those behavior in many settings. So now we are moving to social preferences. I mean, we are revisiting Dictate the Game and Moonlight Game. I'm going to introduce what the Moonlight Game is. So revisit, you're gonna remember Dictate the Game. There are two players, a dictator and recipient. And recipient usually does not have any role to play. Once the dictator decides how much the dictator gives to the recipient, then the recipient is supposed to just to receive that offer by the dictator. That's the dictator game. So if and also if we look at, sorry, this is I should change it. This is typo. This is the ultimatum game. So sorry, this is typo. This is the ultimatum game. I mean, usually people are using ultimatum game and dictate the game a lot. Ultimatum game. Ultimatum game. So it means that in the ultimatum game, recipient can reject it, right? So what this repo is talking about is that uh, how much the recipient will rejected the offer by the dictator across the amount of the money given to the recipient. So if you look at this, this is the ratio. This is the ratio, so that in this case, the dictator gave 50% of the endowment to the recipient. And then y-x represents how much the recipient reject that offer. I mean, it's understandable. And because when 50% of offer is given to the recipient does not rarely reject that offer. Maybe there are some who rejected that offer. I mean, it doesn't make sense, I think, but even though most of them are were not rejecting that offer, that makes sense. But look at this. When 40% of the amount of the endowment was given to the recipient, even almost, it's less than 40, but it's more than 30. So I think that's around 35% of people rejected offer. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Because think about that. I mean, if they reject this offer, then they won't get any payoff, any money. But even though 40% of amount was given to the recipient, actually around 35% of the recipient rejected that offer. That's very interesting point, I think. It means just one sense is that there are some kind of fairness stuff in people's mind, or social norms. I don't know what social norm is, but it's like there's a social norm in their mind. So that it's like these offers seem to violating that kind of a social norms, so that people are just rejecting to punish, I think, to punish the dictator. How about this? For 30% is given, as you can see, the rejection ratio increases more than 40%. So, for example, okay, I have 10 bucks, so I try to give you $3 to you, to the recipient. If the recipient reject it, then no money. But even in that case, as you can see, around the 45, well, I think it's less than 50, but anyway, around the 45% of the recipient reject that offer. That's quite interesting. Also, as you can see, this 10%, I think it's around 70%, less than 70%, but almost the 70% of recipient reject that offer when 10% of money is given. In one sense, if we think people are rational, they should not reject that offer. Because once they reject it, then they don't get any money. So in some sense, if people are selfish and rational, they are supposed to take this offer. That's a rational decision. But people don't take the rational decision in one sense. We can understand why people are taking this kind of decision. We can guess. Probably some of them get angry, and some of them would think that it's a violation of social norm. And there are several reasons. Also, finally, if we look at the last one, in this case, zero offer is given to the recipient, so that one rational thinking is that, no matter the recipient rejects or accept that offer, their money is zero, regardless of the dictator's offering. So that one rational thinking is that probably the percentage ratio of rejecting would be around 50%. That would be rational guessing. If people are rational, maybe some can choose accepting, some can choose rejecting. So that in one sense, for the rational thinkers and rational recipient, they should choose maybe 50% of rejecting. That would be making sense. However, as you can see, the ratio is almost 100%. It cannot change anything about the recipient's payout, but almost of them just choose rejection. So it's quite interesting because people try to reject. I don't know what is unfair offer, because in economics, you should understand that in economics, actually, I would add here, pure economics, we don't know what is a fair thing. We don't know actually, or I don't actually know is not a good word. Maybe we don't define what is a fair thing, what is good. We can. We can. We can define what is a fair thing in economics, in a pure economics, in a way that everybody agree to the rule. In politics, there are many ways to define this is fair, this is unfair, this is good, this is not good, this is justice, this is not justice. There are many things, but in economics, we can't define what is fair thing. In a way that everybody can agree with that. So we don't like to use the word fair, but people, by just understanding, by analyzing this result, we should say that people seems to reject unfair offer at the expense of their own interests, even though I don't know what is fair. Okay. That's quite interesting. Now let's take a look at second thing. So that I should change the word, this thing, so that people start thinking about, okay, what if there is the third player? Third players usually refer to the one who is not involved in that situation. when something happens, when some kind of accident happens, there would be the third player who is not involved with that event. But people were thinking about, okay, if the people try to reject the unfair offer, then what if the third player may punish that player, the giver, dictator. When there is a third player, how the third player will act. People were interested in this kind of game. So people designed dictator game with a third observer. It's basically like a dictator game, but there is a third player, third observer. So may choose to reduce the dictator's payout by paying $3. No, by paying $1, maybe the third player can punish the dictator's payout. In other words, if the third player thinks that the dictator's dividing is not fair, then maybe the third player can choose punishing. By paying, he also should decrease his own benefit, $1, and decrease $3 of dictator's payout after observing the dictator's offer. I mean, so that will be payout like the dictator proposal. This is $10. X is the offer to the recipient, and 3Y means the punishment by the third player. Responder or recipient should get it, just X money, and the third observer can punish the proposer by paying $1 to punish his $3 punishment to the dictator. Anyway, think about the rational guys. If all these players are rational, if third player punish the proposer or dictator, then the third player should be decreasing his or her payout as well. If they decide to punish, his or her payout is also decreasing. So that rational player, this third observer, should not punish. I mean, it's their business. It's not third player's business. So that this third player should not punish it. So that's a kind of rational decision. And there's no role for the second player, recipient. I mean, in a dictator game, this responder should be just staying there without doing anything, just take that offer. So no rule. And for the rational third player, this third player should not take any action. Then, as a dictator game, proposer or dictator will take everything, $10. That's rational equilibrium, as all we can expect. However, if we do that, people actually did a lot of, experiment about this. It's not too clear. So, but this is just one game, but actually there are many related experiments about this. This one, the bigger one, is representing the ratio of ultimatum game. I already explained the ultimatum game here, right? And this is just copied here. So the bigger one represents ultimatum game's rejection ratio. So this is response to the direct behavior of a dictator. But the smaller one is the third player's response, rejection ratio. Then as we can see, the third player is also punishing the dictator by paying its own cost. But that ratio is a little lower than when they are just responding to the dictator directly. But the ratio is just almost half of them when these things is involved with its own money. But still, a group of people are paying money to punish the dictator or punish the proposer. It's very interesting because if we think of just the rational player, they should not do anything because it's not increasing its own money or its own payer. But in a society, it's like we can understand this result like this. In a society, there is a kind of a social norms. It can be a law if it is very strict, but sometimes even though it's not a law, but there is a kind of a social norms or maybe moral moral standards in a society or something. Once that kind of a thing is violated, people may do something even though they need to sacrifice a little of their money. It's like there are some group of people, even though this sub player has nothing to do with this event. So that people, that was one thing. I mean, people cares about some kind of social norms or maybe um, uh, 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 um, social norms or maybe moral stuff. There are a group of people. I'm not talking about everyone is doing that, but I'm talking about there are a group of people who are caring about this kind of things, so they can punish their proposer. And also now people start thinking about, okay, I understand that people are caring about kind of, I don't know what is the social justice, social norms or something that will be different across the countries and the culture. And anyway, in each country, there will be something people think this is important or something. The next step people start thinking about is that, okay, when people are doing something, maybe intention matters. They want to know this. But think about that. If we want one guy's action is altruistic or selfish, how can we define those two? I mean, something is not selfish would be artistic thing, or maybe something which is not artistic can be understood as selfish thing. We don't know that. So that people started thinking about what, I mean, because this idea is basically related to the notion of a help, right? If I help you, then it can be understood as some kind of altruistic action. So, I mean, to understand the notion of a help, it's important to understand what is the selfish things and altruistic things. But to say what is a help, one thing people, one thing very difficult to understand about help is that the difference between intention and the result. Think about this. If one guy, case one, if one guy has one guy help a beggar with good intention, and the beggar got the money, get the money. Maybe the result is good intention and good result. Then we can think this is a kind of good thing, or maybe altruistic or something. However, problem is that problem happens in this case when the intention, an action with bad intention and good result. Sometimes this kind of thing really happens in the real world, or the other side, like when an action with good intention and bad result. The first one is that bad result, bad intention, and bad result. We understand that that is bad thing. So there's no there's no different opinions about this first case. So we regard it. I mean, this will be understand the good things, so we don't need to care about too much. The problem happens here when an action with a bad intention, but if the result is good, is it help? Is this altruistic action? We don't know. When an action with good intention, but the result is bad, then that is a help, is a kind of help, or you should think that is an autistic. We don't know. The point here is that we want to know whether intention is important or not. So that is the result. Moonlight game already, Ryan already presented the last week. So I'm just I'm just to summarize that result again very briefly about that the gist of the paper. So if we think about that, so like there is a Moonlight game, the proposer and the respondent each receive 12 tokens. I mean, the details may be a little bit different because there are different versions of the Moonlight game. But anyway, the most of the stories are the same. So the proposer, dictator, can give or take to 6 tokens. Just think that is $6 to the recipient. And the proposer gives a token, the recipient will receive 3 times of that given token. I mean, this part is already explained by the Ryan. And respondent, on the other hand, can give token to the proposer or pay a certain cost to decrease proposer's token. So, I mean, proposer may give token to the proposer or punish the proposer with paying some cost. So this is the proposer's receiving, and this is the respondent's receiving. Once this x give and the money given to the recipient is positive, that is changed to 3x. And if it is negative, then just taking it. As far as I know, yes, just taking it. When taking, just taking, or maybe when giving, it is given to the 3 times of giving. And when it's when giving the money from the recipients to the proposer, then just as much as the money. But if the recipients want to punish the proposer, then the recipient should pay the cost as well. So that is already explained by Ryan. But interesting, you already saw this, but at the end of the day, the rational thinkers and rational players, for the recipients, there should be no reason to punish the dictator or the proposer. By doing that, the recipient should decrease its own payout. So for the rational recipient should not do anything and should not give anything. By giving them, its money is decreasing. So no action for the recipient is a rational thinking. If that is true, for the rational proposer or dictator, should take everything from the recipient. Because even though the dictator will do that, the recipient won't do anything. That's rational thinking, rational equilibrium. So that, I mean, the unique equilibrium of this Moonlight game is that the dictator is taking everything and the recipient should not do anything, right? Maybe Ryan can type this part in Chinese to summarize this gist. It will be very helpful. Going to write what does the meaning in here. 제가 이 부분만 한국어로 제가 짧게 설명드릴게요. 한국 학생들한테. 지금 이게 뭐냐면 이 문나이트 게임은 저기 지난 시간에 라이안이 저기 설명했던 건데 독재자가 돈을 주면 그것이 3배가 되어가지고 이 리시피언트한테 받고요. 만약에 독재자가 이거를 받고요. 그다음에 리시피언트는 여기서 일부를 돌려주거나 아니면 일부를 가지고 자기 돈을 희생하면서 독재자를 퍼니시할 수 있어요. 이런 구조인데 이거 실제 하면은 이거 그 리시피언트는 무슨 짓을 해도 자기 이익이 주기 때문에 아무것도 안 할 것이고 독재자는 제가 아무것도 안 할 것이기 때문에 무조건 다 뺏는 게 가장 합리적인 어떤 결과라는 거죠. Are you typing, Ryan? I mean, Ryan will summarize this in Chinese because that is the gist of this part. So she is summarizing this story in Chinese. Okay. Okay, I assume that you guys understood. So again, I'm saying again, this is a testing. Basically, this is not a Moonlight game. Actually, this is called a trust game. Actually, the structure of a trust game is almost the same as this one. So actually, this is a trust game. What is a trust game? Is this? If I'm giving my money to you, whether you are paying back to me or not, that's a kind of trust. So if I'm investing my money to you, that the money is tripled and given to the recipient, and among that money, recipient will decide how much money will give back to the dictator. That is a trust game. However, this time the dictator can take the money from the recipient, and the recipient also can punish the proposer. But in order to punish the proposer, the dictator, the recipient also should sacrifice its money a little. That's the gist of the paper. But as I said, it says basically no reason to move for the recipient. No matter what is happening, recipient will not do anything because that's the best things that maximizes money. But because the proposer will know that, so the proposer will take everything from the recipient. That is the rational equilibrium. But if we do this, as we can guess, you already saw this. Here is a positive correlation graph is given. I mean, say very simply, x-axis is kind of the degree of the money given to the recipient, and how much money is paying back to the proposer by the recipient. As you can guess, once the more money is given, then they are paying back a little more. If their money is taken by the dictator or proposer, and also they try to punish them. But what's interesting here is that in order to punish that, they should also pay. They should also sacrifice their money in order to punish the dictator by the recipient. But they do that. It's the rational behavior in some sense. Well, I don't know what is rational, but rational and selfish behavior, if we are finding a selfish and rational behavior, they should not do anything. Even though they are punishing that, their money is decreasing as well. There's no reason, but people do that. What it means, it's like, as I already explained, it's like there is a kind of social norms, or it's like there is a social norms, or that there is some kind of moral standard, or causes that people follow. Something. So, and so on. And if we just consider rational players, these rational players should not consider this, because we are thinking about rational and selfish players, but they actually cares about it. But actually the gist of the Moonlight game is not that. Actually, when they were doing this, basically they were playing response to the human dictator, for example, human dictator and computer dictator. Computer dictator is picking up a number from rolling a dice or from doing something, and just sometimes attack, taking money, or sometimes giving the money. That is done by a computer. But that sometimes the human did that. They also sometimes take the money, give the money. The problem is that recipients know this. So even though computer is taking or giving the money to the recipient, that is sometimes just happens by chance, by rolling a dice. But this just done with the intention. When they do this, this is, even though this is a tiny increasing, but increasing actually is not matter here. More important thing is that significantly, I mean, when they are playing this game with a human, they are reciprocating very strongly. But when they are playing this game with a computer, actually they are not reciprocating. That's the case of the paper. So what this paper is talking about is that it's like people's intention seems to be very important when people are reciprocating. Think about this. When I'm working, and maybe I already explained, but the earthquake happens, so um, I hurt. But even though I was hurt from that earthquake, I may be angry about the government responses to that earthquake. But when I'm angry to the government, actually I'm responding to the people in the government, or maybe I'm responding to the human beings' behavior about the earthquake's responses. I'm not responding to the earthquake itself. That's the point. Because earthquake didn't have any intention, but people may have intention. I'm responding to the human's intention. I'm not responding to the something happens by chance. So intention seems to be important when we are reciprocating. But the real idea, real paper, or real important thing of this paper or this idea is that when we come up with what is the artist thing, what's the selfishness thing, what is the health, when we are thinking about this, actually one factor we should consider is intention. I'm helping you with bad intention, then my health should be understood as good thing or bad thing, right? If we don't consider intention, what's important here is just the result. If the result is good, then that's good thing. If the result is bad, that's bad thing. However, if we are considering intention, that means something good happens, but the intention is bad. Maybe some of the people, not all of them, but some of them would think that it's not a good thing. That's the point. Intention is important. Okay, from here, I'm going to explain psychological game theory a little more, but I think it's a good time to stop here. And from next offline classes, I'm just introduce just a little bit how to deal with the psychological game theory. What is the psychological game theory? Psychological game theory is this. We will learn standard game theory. The standard game theory, it's like we dealt with players and their actions and the payoff. Sort of becomes history. So that's good, that's okay. But the psychological game theory deals with one more. Players, actions, payoffs, and their belief. I mean, you know, in a standard game theory, belief is an important factor to be dealt with. However, in psychological game theory, belief is directly affect payoff, material payoff. But even though they are thinking about beliefs, but belief does not affect payoff directly. But psychological game theory, belief directly affect payoff. It changes everything. Just because of these two, this difference, I mean, everything is changing. In a psychological game theory, it's like, think about that. Why this is important? I mean, think about some kind of emotion. What kind of emotion? Think about this. A lot of emotions are related to our belief or expectation. The reason, for example, why my fiance make me angry is because, for example, I'm talking about this one example. The reason why my fiance makes me angry is because I mean, he or she does not fulfill my expectation. Right? What it means, lots of emotion, lots of emotion can be measured or transferred by our expectation. So how to measure an emotional sort of thing? By using our expectation. Because think about that. When our goal is not achieved, then we feel depression. Or when I'm thinking my action will make my friends depressed, I may feel guilty. That means it's kind of there's a bridge of expectation. When we are using expectation, we can make some kind of connections, guilt feeling or guilt or emotions, and we can use this kind of emotions with using expectation in a game theory. That is a psychological game theory. So in a psychological game theory, we dealt with lots of emotions, expectation, and some kind of norms and everything. So I'm going to briefly explain it next week. So I'm starting